The shove sounded small in the daylight, yet it split the street open. My wife's shoes scraped concrete, her elbow hit the curb, and the phone she used to film their noon inspection slid under a truck's bumper. I stepped between her and the man in the wrinkled polo stamped HOA, hands open, eyes steady. He swelled taller, barking about violations. The metal at his hip wasn't a badge. It was a cuff case hung wrong, the kind you buy when you want to pretend you matter. His partner hovered near his waistband as if a plastic holster could turn a whisper into thunder. I read the tremor in fingers, the bruise on knuckles, the constant search for permission. Doors opened. Screens lifted. A teenager's drone rose on a soft whine and fixed an unblinking eye on the street. The Marine across the way folded his arms. No shouting yet, just heat on asphalt, and my wife breathing through pain as she cradled her wrist. I asked the guard to step back with calm that makes a crowd lean forward. He lunged instead, flashing cuffs like a trophy and swinging from my wrist. I moved half a step and let pride overreach. He stumbled, caught himself, flushed red. His partner stiffened, then faltered at the ring of phones. Karen arrived like a gavel. 55 plus, short white hair, binder clutched, the squint of someone who thinks daylight is her stage. She filmed from 3 feet, reciting fines in a steady cadence. She labeled my wife a disturbance. She labeled me a problem for the board. She called the drone harassment. The street learned the shape of fragile power. The teen airdropped the shove video into a sea of phones. Screens filled with the same frozen frame, and HOA palm blasting through my wife's balance. A neighbor gasped. Another said to keep recording. Sweat gathered. Wind tugged at their polos. Doubt showed itself. My wife touched my shoulder. Her wrist bloomed purple. I wanted to flash a badge I wasn't wearing and end the theater in one breath, but I wanted something simpler more. I wanted this street to remember that ordinary people can hold a line without a title. If this stands for you, tap like, share with a neighbor who needs it, add a comment with a moment you would have stepped forward, and subscribe because what lands next will matter. Karen snapped her binder to a page too new for history. The guards revived at the sound of her voice. The one with the cuffs fainted right, reached left. I kept my hands visible and gave him space to fail. The partner drifted to flank and found a Marine already there. The drone dipped lower. Its reflection skipped on the truck's bumper beside my wife's phone. I slid the phone out with 2 fingers, careful around a cracked corner. She nodded once, pain bright in her eyes, resolve set in her jaw. Karen paced the curb, pointing to imaginary lines, promising hearings and penalties. Neighbors stopped whispering and started narrating. The guards, corner by quiet, began to sweat through polyester. I heard them before I saw them. Sirens bending through noon, a ribbon of sound sewing toward us. A cruiser turned into cul-de-sac, lights strobing across glass, red and blue skating over the cuff chain still dangling from a shaking hand. Doors cracked. A voice told everyone to hold position. Karen pointed with a binder and accused me of assaulting her team. The officer's gaze moved from her to the drone, to my wife's wrist, to the ring of neighbors, and finally settled on me, holding there as if weighing a decision none of them were ready for. The officer's shadow cut across the asphalt, his gaze taking in the cuffs, my wife's bruising wrist, the semicircle of phones. He asked for a simple retell. Karen stepped in first, crisp voice and short white hair gleaming in the sun, calling it a lawful inspection and a hostile interference. She framed the shove as a stumble. The guard with scraped knuckles stared at the ground. I kept my voice level and short. The teen lifted his drone controller, thumbed a button, and held out a phone with a live feed. The officer watched the moment the HOA palm hit my wife's shoulder and sent her off balance onto the curb. He paused the frame, zoomed, exhaled. Karen pressed closer with her binder, a finger on highlighted lines about compliance. The officer asked who employed the guards. Karen named a private vendor under an HOA contract. The officer radioed, eyes still on the bruise darkening along my wife's wrist. He took our names, the guards' names, the teen's name, the Marine's. He didn't ask mine beyond what was necessary. I let that be. He returned the phone and said the video would sit with the report. Civil matter for now. No further action on scene. Everyone step back and keep hands visible. Karen nodded like she'd won. The guards tried to stand taller again, polyester tugging at their shoulders. The cruiser rolled away, lights off. The street exhaled, but not relief. Karen's tone hardened when the engine noise faded. She recited fine schedules like a prayer and promised a hearing. The guard with cuffs swung them lightly, chain winking in daylight as if the sun could make authority. My wife shifted weight away from her wrist and kept filming with the other hand, breath pulled tight. I shot photos of the bruise with a ruler for scale, the cracked corner of her phone, the scuffs on the curb where she landed. The Marine moved to the street edge, back straight, making no speech and saying everything. The teen hovered the drone lower, capturing close-ups that would outlast spin. An hour later, when the cul-de-sac changed light and shadows stretched thin, someone dragged orange chalk across our curb in a bold slash. Not a mark for repair. A flag. The glove that drew it slid out of frame on the drone recording, a silent exit over grass. I knelt and photographed the chalk dust, the line's thickness, the direction of drag, a small footprint in soft soil by the hydrangeas. Neighbors stepped out again, pretending to grab mail, standing longer than mail requires. Karen posted at the far corner, short white hair sharp against the sky, the binder hugged to her ribs. She announced a special meeting and told anyone listening that disorder would not be tolerated. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The guards flanked her, restless and damp with sweat. I checked my wife's wrist, cradled in a sling we rigged from a clean dish towel. She said the pain was livable, the insult less so. We walked the property line together, noting new violation tags on the side gate and a warning sticker slapped crooked on our mailbox. The Marine joined us and pointed to a security camera angle that might catch the chalk hand if it returned. The teen offered to set a geofenced alert on the drone for movement at night, then caught himself, glancing at my wife's face. She thanked him anyway. The afternoon mellowed, but the air held an edge. A contractor's van idled by the model home and then drifted off, too slow to be casual. Karen spoke to a couple on the sidewalk with quick, clipped hands, like a coach calling plays. They nodded and then didn't make eye contact as they passed us. I printed stills from the video at a small shop near the highway and taped copies in a slim folder with notes, times, names, angles. Documentation is a lighthouse. It doesn't stop waves. It tells you where you are when they hit. We were back in the living room when the thud came through the glass. Not a crack, a full-body sound, freighted and violent. The brick rolled twice across the hardwood and stopped against a chair leg. A note was pinned under a small nail, hammered through folded paper. Stay out of HOA business. My wife stood with her hand over her mouth, eyes rimmed with heat and disbelief. I took photos before I touched anything, then lifted the brick with a clean dishcloth and laid it in a box. Through the broken frame, I saw the street quiet as a held breath. Karen stood near the corner, chin raised, binder clutched like a shield. The guards looked anywhere but at our house. The wind carried the flutter of the paper and a thin hiss through glass teeth. Somewhere on the porch, the Marine's boots scuffed once, as if marking time before the next move none of them would see coming. By noon, the model home smelled like coffee and stage vanilla. Folding chairs scraped tile as neighbors filed in, eyes flicking between the tidy fake living room and the binder in Karen's hands. She stood at the kitchen island under bright daylight, short white hair precise, smile practiced, voice brisk as a metronome. She called it an emergency meeting on order and safety. She did not say brick. She did not say shove. Brent planted himself near the island with cuffs clipped outside his belt for show, chain winking under the recessed lights. Cole hovered by a glass patio door, hands restless at his waistband, scanning for someone to frighten. The retired Marine sat where he could see both men and the only exit. My wife slipped into the front row with her sling and a calm camera, lens steady on Karen's controlled breathing. I carried a slim folder and the thick bylaws, edges feathered with tabs. When Karen invited comments, I did not step to the island. I spoke from the aisle where the sunlight angled across the floor, the light that makes people choose honesty or flinch from it. I read aloud the section numbers she'd highlighted and set beside them the archived versions neighbors had emailed me at dawn. Her edits were not typos. They were gates, narrowing rights and widening fines. She tried to wave it off as modernization. I turned a page and showed the vendor contract for private security, the missing license number, part where patrol limits were quietly removed. Brent shifted. Cole swallowed. A woman from 3 doors down raised a hand and told the room about a late fee stacked on a fictitious trash bin violation. An older man spoke of letters that multiplied after he complained once. The room warmed with the heat of seeing a pattern and naming it. Karen switched tactics. She stepped down from the island, binder open like a shield, and recited decorum rules. She called for silence. I placed printed stills of the shove on the counter, time-stamped and clear, then the photo of the orange chalk slash at our curb, the note that rode the brick through our window. I kept my tone even and let the facts do the work. If this feels like daylight lifting a lid, tap like to push it wider, share so the next street is not alone, and subscribe because in 2 minutes you will see what happens when a story refuses to bow. Brent tried to intimidate an elderly neighbor who muttered that the ledger of fines never balanced. He leaned in close and called it a misunderstanding. The Marine's chair scraped once. Brent stopped leaning. Cole looked to Karen for a cue and found none. The teen stood against a wall, drone controller at his hip, phone aimed at the island. The binder, the tabs, the small muscles at Karen's jaw. Then Karen produced a document with a flourish, page protector smooth like silk. She called it a restraining order against harassment of board officials, a precaution after threats. She said my presence at the meeting violated it. The room stilled. I read the header, the case number, the vague signature scrawled where a judge's name should be. The file stamp time sat in the future by 6 minutes. Paper tries to travel faster than clocks, only when someone runs it through the wrong door. A knock split the hush. 2 city officers stepped in, sun at their backs, hands open but stiff with caution. They had received a call about an escalating situation and a protective order. They asked me to step aside. My wife rose with her camera. The Marine asked to read the paper. Karen held it out just beyond his reach. Brent smiled with relief that wasn't earned. I handed my folder to my wife and told her to keep every second rolling. I told the officers I would comply with any lawful instruction and that a county supervisor would want that paper photographed, front and back, in the next 5 minutes. They shifted to the calm in my tone, and the chorus of phones now raised shoulder high. Karen urged them to act. The first officer glanced at the bruise on my wife's wrist, then back at his partner, then at the page protector. He cuffed me anyway. Not roughly, not cruelly, just a choice made quickly in a room heavy with angles. A neighbor gasped. Another whispered that this would look bad for them later. Brent exhaled like the room belonged to him again. Karen announced that the board expected civility moving forward. My wife kept the lens steady. I kept my shoulders loose and my voice low and told her to hold on to the folder and not to argue with anyone who came within a step of her. They walked me through the bright doorway into louder noon. Outside, the cul-de-sac shadows were short and honest. As I passed the teen, his phone buzzed with a fresh notification from the drone app. He flicked his thumb, and his pupils widened. On his screen, a live window popped from a drone parked at the edge of the retention pond behind the clubhouse. Brent and Cole, visible in the rectangle, heaving cardboard boxes into the back of Karen's SUV, contractor's logo stamped on the sides, cash bands peeking through a split seam. The screen capture icon flashed. He lifted the phone so my wife could see, and the frame froze on money in daylight and hands that did not know anyone was watching. The black SUV lingered at the curb for a full minute before its engine gave a low growl, and it rolled away, slow and deliberate. No one on the street missed it. The sheriff watched it until the taillights vanished, then told one of his deputies to get the plate numbers to state investigators. He didn't say the name we were both thinking, but the weight of it sat between us. The neighborhood was quieter now, though the air still carried the scent of wet paper and smoke from the model home. Karen was gone in the back of the cruiser, Brent and Cole seated apart on the curb, both staring at the ground. My wife stepped to my side, the sling still supporting her wrist, her other hand slipping into mine. For the first time since the shove, she allowed herself to exhale. The shepherd settled at our feet, eyes on the street, still alert. The sheriff gathered the neighbors near the intersection. He explained that the security contract with the private guards was void effective immediately and that county deputies would handle any safety concerns until the board was restructured. Murmurs rippled through the group, a mix of relief and disbelief. The Marine spoke up first, proposing a community vote to formally dissolve the HOA's authority over security matters. Hands went up, hesitant at first, then almost unanimous. Even those who had been silent during the worst of it now raised their arms. Brent signed a written statement on the hood of a patrol car. His pen scratched in uneven lines, his voice low as he admitted to enforcing fabricated violations for cash bonuses. Cole handed over the handgun in an evidence bag without being asked, setting it gently on the curb before stepping back. The Marine put a hand on his shoulder, saying nothing but grounding him in a way words couldn't. From the back of another cruiser, Karen watched the vote. She didn't speak. Her short white hair was plastered to her forehead, her binder gone, her hands cuffed in her lap. When the sheriff signaled for the cars to pull away, she kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at anyone. The ledger, now sealed in a clear evidence pouch, rested on the hood of a county SUV, drying in the sun. My wife and I walked back to our porch together. On the way, we passed the curb where the orange chalk slash still clung to the concrete. It would wash away with the next rain, but its memory would last. The shepherd paused there, sniffed once, then followed us inside. On the mailbox sat her cracked phone, the screen spattered from the fall. I set my badge beside it, not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as a promise that I would always choose truth over comfort, even when it meant standing still in the middle of a storm. Neighbors drifted back to their homes, talking quietly. The Marine lingered at the end of the block, scanning the street like a watchman. The team packed away his drone, but not before showing me one last frame, a still of the SUV's tinted window where the faint outline of a man's profile could just be made out. The file was already backed up in 3 places. As the sun dipped lower, the sheriff returned, telling me the state had taken interest in the burner phone's messages. The deputy mayor's name was no longer just a whisper. It was on an active investigation list. He thanked me, though I hadn't done anything that a person shouldn't do for their own street. I told him this wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us now. Standing there with the lights slanting over the roofs, I looked at my wife's face, tired, strong, unshaken, and thought about how close this day had come to ending differently. If what we'd done here felt like standing beside someone in a fight worth having, tap like, share it with a neighbor who needs to see that standing your ground matters, and subscribe, because the next story isn't about a single street. It's about every street that's been told to stay quiet. The last sound of the day was the cruiser engines fading into the distance, carrying Karen, Brent, and Cole toward a different kind of reckoning. The rest of us stayed, the air cleaner now, the lines of the street sharper in the evening light, and for the first time in months, no one was afraid to stand in the open. The barrel tilted down first, almost too slight to notice, then the rest of the gun followed as Cole's shoulders slumped. His hand shook as if the weight of the metal had doubled in an instant. The click of the safety sliding back into place was barely louder than his exhale. Around us, the crowd's stillness broke into a rustle of phone cameras shifting to get the moment. Brent cursed under his breath, telling Cole he just made them look weak. Cole didn't look at him. I stepped forward and closed the space, not to take the weapon, but to speak low enough for only Cole to hear. I told him that what he just did might have saved more than one life, including his own. He blinked hard, like the words didn't fit with the day he'd been promised. Behind us, the Marine stepped into the frame, broad and silent, anchoring the ground. Then it happened, the sound of canvas tearing, papers hitting pavement. Karen's tote had slipped from her grip in the shuffle, the binder thudding down, but what caught everyone's eyes was the black ledger that slid free. Its cover was worn, corners bent from years of opening and closing. The wind teased the pages open, revealing columns of names, dates, fine amounts, and cryptic notes in a tight, deliberate hand. Paper clips held small photographs, driveways, porches, and in one, an envelope stuffed with bills. I crouched, not touching, just letting the evidence breathe in daylight while neighbors circled closer. The teen's drone hung above, angling to catch every page in focus. Brent moved to snatch it up, but the Marine's boot planted on the ledger's corner stopped him cold. Cole didn't move. He just stared at the ink like he'd never seen it before. My wife took a photo from 2 feet away, framing the ledger against Karen's face in the background. Karen froze, binder hugged her chest, short white hair trembling in the light breeze. Her voice came out too fast, saying it was fabricated, private, stolen, anything but what it clearly was. The crowd murmured, the kind of sound that means belief has shifted. The team lifted his phone, showing a live feed from just minutes earlier. Brent and Cole loading contractor stamp boxes into Karen's SUV behind the clubhouse. Through a split seam in one box, cash bands glinted. The connection between the ledger and those boxes was no longer theory. It was recorded, stamped, and already sent to half the neighborhood. Brent's voice cracked as he told Cole to get the SUV. Cole didn't move. Instead, he asked Karen if what was in the ledger was why she told him to push people harder, to rack up fines, to make it hurt so they'll fold. Karen didn't answer. The pause was enough. The ledger's pages flipped under the breeze, landing on a spread marked with red ink, initials that matched known board members, numbers in the thousands, and a column labeled vendor cut. A neighbor knelt to photograph it, while another was already calling the county tip line on speakerphone, her voice steady. Karen stepped back toward the street. Brent tried to block the cameras, his open hand catching the lens of one neighbor's phone. The Marine shifted his stance, making the path clear again. Cole finally spoke, loud enough for everyone to hear, that Karen had been paying them in cash to escalate situations, to make sure fines stuck, to keep the board untouchable. My wife didn't stop filming. I didn't move toward Karen. The ledger was doing the work, each page a blade cutting through the fiction she'd built. Then, from down the block, came the sharp wail of a smoke alarm. Heads turned toward the model home. Karen's eyes darted there and back. Brent swore again, under his breath. The smell of something acrid began to carry on the breeze. The ledger still lay on the warm pavement, the Marine's boot holding it in place. I looked at Karen, and she looked at me, and I knew before the first thin ribbon of smoke appeared that she was about to try to burn more than paper. The smoke was faint at first, curling out from the roof vents of the model home, just enough to catch the sunlight. By the time we crossed the street, it had thickened into gray threads, seeping along the eaves. The sprinklers inside had triggered, their sharp hiss audible before the door even opened. Water streamed under the threshold, carrying with it the curl of paper edges and ink bleeding into black rivers. Karen was already inside, her shoes splashing across laminate as she yanked open filing cabinets and fed folders straight into the nearest spray. Pages wilted instantly, colors running together into unreadable swirls. She didn't look panicked, she looked determined. The binder was gone. In its place, she carried a smaller pouch, clutched tight against her ribs. The Marine shouldered past me toward the center of the room. I moved to the far wall where a stage couch had been shoved awkwardly aside. Beneath it, the carpet was pulled back, revealing the squared outline of a bolted floor safe. The bolts were rusted, but water had loosened them enough for the Marine to wrench the cover free. The safe's door groaned open, revealing exactly what we needed to see. Inside were invoices with inflated totals, all from the same contractor's stamp on the boxes we'd seen earlier. Each had a neat signature in the corner, initials that matched entries in the ledger. Bundles of pre-signed violation slips were wrapped in rubber bands, each one blank except for the fine amount already filled in. A burner phone lay at the top of the stack, its cheap plastic case smeared with water, but still vibrating against the metal floor. I picked it up. The screen lit to a series of unread messages, all from the same contact. The name on the screen was not Brent, not Cole, not Karen. It was the deputy mayor. The last message, sent only minutes ago, read, "Is it done?" The county sheriff's boots echoed from the front hallway, his deputies fanning out behind him. He took one look at the safe's contents, then at Karen, whose short white hair clung wet to her face as she backed toward the rear exit. She said it was a misunderstanding, that the safe wasn't hers, that anyone could have planted the files. The sheriff didn't raise his voice. He simply told her she was under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. Karen's eyes darted to the burner phone in my hand. She opened her mouth, but whatever she meant to say was swallowed by the click of the sheriff's handcuffs locking into place. Brent stood in the doorway, rain from the sprinklers dripping off his chin, frozen between fight and flight. Cole remained near the window, gaze locked on the safe as if the truth inside had turned him to stone. A deputy stepped forward to bag the evidence, sliding the ledger from under the Marine's boot and placing the burner phone in a separate pouch. The sheriff told me to hold on to the printed photos my wife had taken, that they would go straight into the case file. Outside, neighbors stood under the bright afternoon sun, watching as deputies moved in and out with boxes of records, each one dripping onto the sidewalk. Through the glass, I saw Karen in the back of a cruiser, her face pressed to the window, lips moving in words no one would hear. The burner phone buzzed once more in the deputy's gloved hand. He glanced at the screen, then at the sheriff. The message was short, just 2 words, "We talk." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. He told his driver to take Karen to holding and to call in a secure line to the state investigators. Then he looked at me and said this wasn't the top, it was just the first rung. Outside, at the far end of the block, a black SUV idled at the curb. Its windows were tinted dark enough to swallow the sunlight. Behind that glass, a figure sat perfectly still, watching the scene unfold without moving a muscle. The black SUV lingered at the curb for a full minute before its engine gave a low growl, and it rolled away, slow and deliberate. No one on the street missed it. The sheriff watched it until the taillights vanished, then told one of his deputies to get the plate numbers to state investigators. He didn't say the name we were both thinking, but the weight of it sat between us. The neighborhood was quieter now, though the air still carried the scent of wet paper and smoke from the model home. Karen was gone in the back of the cruiser, Brent and Cole seated apart on the curb, both staring at the ground. My wife stepped to my side, the sling still supporting her wrist, her other hand slipping into mine. For the first time since the shove, she allowed herself to exhale. The shepherd settled at our feet, eyes on the street, still alert. The sheriff gathered the neighbors near the intersection. He explained that the security contract with the private guards was void effective immediately and that county deputies would handle any safety concerns until the board was restructured. Murmurs rippled through the group, a mix of relief and disbelief. The Marine spoke up first, proposing a community vote to formally dissolve the HOA's authority over security matters. Hands went up, hesitant at first, then almost unanimous. Even those who had been silent during the worst of it now raised their arms. Brent signed a written statement on the hood of a patrol car. His pen scratched in uneven lines, his voice low as he admitted to enforcing fabricated violations for cash bonuses. Cole handed over the handgun in an evidence bag without being asked, setting it gently on the curb before stepping back. The Marine put a hand on his shoulder, saying nothing but grounding him in a way words couldn't. From the back of another cruiser, Karen watched the vote. She didn't speak. Her short white hair was plastered to her forehead, her binder gone, her hands cuffed in her lap. When the sheriff signaled for the cars to pull away, she kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at anyone. The ledger, now sealed in a clear evidence pouch, rested on the hood of a county SUV, drying in the sun. My wife and I walked back to our porch together. On the way, we passed the curb where the orange chalk slash still clung to the concrete. It would wash away with the next rain, but its memory would last. The shepherd paused there, sniffed once, then followed us inside. On the mailbox sat her cracked phone, the screen spattered from the fall. I set my badge beside it, not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as a promise that I would always choose truth over comfort, even when it meant standing still in the middle of a storm. Neighbors drifted back to their homes, talking quietly. The Marine lingered at the end of the block, scanning the street like a watchman. The team packed away his drone, but not before showing me one last frame, a still of the SUV's tinted window, where the faint outline of a man's profile could just be made out. The file was already backed up in 3 places. As the sun dipped lower, the sheriff returned, telling me the state had taken interest in the burner phone's messages. The deputy mayor's name was no longer just a whisper. It was on an active investigation list. He thanked me, though I hadn't done anything that a person shouldn't do for their own street. I told him this wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us now. Standing there with the lights slanting over the roofs, I looked at my wife's face, tired, strong, unshaken, and thought about how close this day had come to ending differently. If what we'd done here felt like standing beside someone in a fight worth having, tap like, share it with a neighbor who needs to see that standing your ground matters, and subscribe, because the next story isn't about a single street. It's about every street that's been told to stay quiet. The last sound of the day was the cruiser engines fading into the distance, carrying Karen, Brent, and Cole toward a different kind of reckoning. The rest of us stayed, the air cleaner now, the lines of the street sharper in the evening light, and for the first time in months, no one was afraid to stand in the open.